Well, this is going to sound a little weird, but
what was it, like a week ago? They released screenshots from the Final Fantasy VII remake that who knows when it's coming out. So did you guys have any thoughts on that? If you got a chance to look at the article?
I think it looks pretty sweet.
Yeah, it definitely looks HD.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely a huge improvement. It always baffles me when I go back and play like an old game, because in your mind you remember it looking better, but then you realize, nope.
Yep.
Yeah, like I saw the screenshot at first and I was like, okay, whatever. Seems like a typical HD game. And then they showed like the old version next to it and I was like, holy crap.
Seriously. Yeah, I did not remember the game looking that bad. Like when I was a kid, it was like, this looks amazing.
Yep.
So I noticed like on the Kotaku article, they kind of mentioned that there was on the menu, there was a magic menu and a materia menu. And like, I know, Adam, you said you never played it, but I think that's kind of odd. I'm wondering if they've changed the combat system a little bit for it.
Maybe. I feel like that would be a poor decision if they changed it.
Yeah.
Like something as central as combat.
Yeah. I think they could change the actual combat. I think would be all right, but I don't think they should change like the materia system. Yeah. If you could switch materia up in the middle of battle, that might be cool.
I don't know a whole lot. I mean, I've never played this game. I probably will play the remake just because of all the hype and everything, but that's one of the things that I wonder about anytime you're remaking a game is like, what's okay to change, especially with a game like Final Fantasy, where it's like the fan base is massive. Like, what's safe to change? Because you could just do graphics, but you know they're going to want to do some gameplay stuff too, and then you're going to have people that are loving it, and you're going to have a ton of people that are just like,
Yeah,
I don't know. I feel like with a game as successful as Final Fantasy VII was, that you should not touch the gameplay. Personally.
I think that's, like you said, there's a big danger to it because there's a lot of, I mean, the game came out 20 years ago, maybe? And there's been a lot of changes in like what's expected gameplay mechanics now. But I think if you change what now would be perceived as bad mechanics, I think fans of the old game would be angry because
Absolutely.
That's part of the charm of the old game, maybe,
But that's one of the things, though, is like when you're looking at also addressing new players, like I've never played Final Fantasy before. If I play this for the first time and they leave in stuff that just, kind of sucks, I'm not saying there is stuff like that. I don't know, enough to say, but, is it a good game design decision to leave that stuff in, or is it better to say, hey, we want to appeal to some new players as well? Or...
Yeah, I think it's a fine line. Like in the very original Final Fantasy, I don't know if you guys ever played that one, but for like the NES, there was a mechanic that was just infuriating where you would basically tell your guys to attack different enemies, and if, say, you had two guys attacking the same enemy and the first attack killed it, the second attack would basically just be a wasted turn. It would just come up and say ineffective because they would still be trying to attack the thing that was no longer there. So something like that, absolutely change it. But something like as central as the materia system, I would stay away personally.
Yeah. Especially the materia system, because that one they haven't... that's not a system that they've like iterated on and improved over the past 20 years. They just kind of did it for Final Fantasy VII, and then Final Fantasy VIII had a totally new system.
Well, that's what they do with Final Fantasies. Each one is kind of completely different.
Right. Well, and that's kind of like what I'm saying. For new players, the materia system would be a new system. It's not like, oh, this is a shitty version of a current system.
Yeah.
It's definitely like possible that they've just, also completely reworked the UI to make it more intuitive. So maybe that's, what's apparent in this graphic. I don't know.
Yeah, that could be.
Yeah, it's definitely hard to tell from just a screenshot.
Right. Yeah. And I guess that kind of goes to like what is the purpose of making a new remake of it? Is it like just to make the graphics prettier for the fans, to get new fans, or like to preserve the game. I think if you're doing it just to preserve the game, you could either just port it to something like the Wii Classic library, or just update the graphics and leave it at that.
Well,
Yep.
yeah, I think that when you have to look at it from also like a marketing standpoint as the company. I mean, nostalgia sells. We've talked about that before. And
that's true.
I mean, if you can remarket it, I mean, like, if you're looking at somebody like me, like I'm a good example, like I probably wouldn't go back and play the old version just because like I never really got into it. But hearing all the hype and everything about the remake, I would probably enjoy that more than if I were to go back and try and play the old game, because the old game doesn't have any nostalgia for me. But so it's a way of like preserving it, also appealing to, you know, all those nostalgic people, but also widening your audience. So it's kind of like a refresh on, you know, getting people to buy.
Yeah, I'm sure they're also interested in getting back some of the, like, so for example, for me, I played all the Final Fantasies when I was little, like as I was growing up, and then somewhere around Final Fantasy VIII, I just sort of lost interest, and I haven't played any of the last couple because I just didn't really enjoy the newer ones. So they're probably looking to try and get some of those older fans that they've lost back as well.
Yeah. Excuse me. Yeah, that's a good point. There was something else I wanted to say about it, and now I can't remember. Okay, well, if I think about it later, we can come back to it. So I came up with a list of some old games that I liked that I thought should get a good next gen release.
Okay, let's hear it.
We can just go down the list and kind of go round robin. First game, did you guys ever play a game called Dragon Seeds?
Nope.
The PlayStation.
No.
It was this. It was like a dragon breeding and fighting simulator. So you could go to this lab and clone dragons, and then you could train them and raise them, and then you put them in battle with each other. And as a kid, I thought it was great. There was a lot of gameplay problems with it, and obviously it was like PlayStation 1, so the 3D graphics were pretty bad. But I think if they addressed the gameplay issues and improved the graphics, I think it could be a really cool next-gen game, especially because one of the main problems with the battle system was that it was basically rock, paper, scissors. Like, you choose one attack and hope that your opponent doesn't block it, or choose an attack that's stronger than it. And so winning battles was largely luck. So if they improved that and improved the graphics and like added like that whole like monster breeding mechanic where you have some control over like I'm gonna take an ice dragon and an electricity dragon and make a freezing lightning dragon, you know, that's really cool.
So what you really want is like a Pokemon battle game where you can make your own Pokemon.
With dragons. They're all dragons. they're all Gyarados and Dragonar, yes.
That does sound like an interesting concept that I think that would do really well because of that whole like customization thing, and
yeah,
especially with the takeoff of like procedural stuff. You know, if you had, you know, that user content created kind of a thing going in there, that would be pretty interesting. But let me ask you one thing, because this kind of goes back to that whole what's safe to change, because you mentioned that you would want them to fix the gameplay. So is it really a remake at that point, or are they just making a new game with a similar concept?
That's a fair point. Yeah, I guess maybe if they change the battle system up too much, maybe it might, instead of being Dragon Seeds, it would be Dragon Seeds 2, maybe. Because there wasn't really like much of a story or characters to carry over to continue it. But there were some mechanics that were pretty cool. Like when you made your dragon, you could go through and like you would choose different types of dragons, and then you could also choose like you could go through and form like a 4 or 5 word sentence that affected how your dragon stats were generated. So like you'd have a dragon that was called like, or that was made with a sentence like, the cold wind blows forever or something. Or you could make one with like, the raging fire flies to heaven. And those different sentences would generate different kinds of dragons with different stats. So I think if they kept that in there, I think that would be enough to make it still a Dragon Siege game and not just a new game.
That's pretty interesting. I mean, that does sound you're kind of selling me on it. I kind of like it.
It's cool. I mean, I haven't played it since I was like 12, and I loved it when I was 12, so I'm kind of afraid to try it again, to ruin my nostalgia. But
that's one of the things that I always wonder, like, should I go play it again? And like, if you were to go play that game right now, you would probably think it sucks because honestly, it would be nothing like what you remembered. It's just like I remember I tried to play GoldenEye, and it I literally stopped playing it because I was like, no, this is gonna ruin it for me. Like, I remember enjoying this game. I want to keep remembering it that way.
Yeah, I loved GoldenEye.
But at the same time, just last weekend I bought a Sega Genesis just so I could play this old game, and it's just as fun as I remember.
What was the game?
It's just this like silly gems game. It's I think it's called Columns. It's just like a basic, gem breaker kind of Tetris-y game. And but I remembered one of the things I remembered about it was like the music was really good, and it still is really good. And it was fun because like I got to introduce my mom and my brother to it, and they were like skeptical because I kept talking about this thing. I've literally been looking for a Genesis just to buy this game for like months now. And they finally had one at the cool stuff, and then they were playing it with me, and they were getting into it. And it was just cool because it was like we all got, a taste of that nostalgia.
Nice, that's cool. All right, let's just go around the virtual table. Mark, did you have a list of games?
I do have some games. The big one that I've always wanted is Chrono Trigger. I don't know if you guys played it. I think it would be pretty hard to do a remaster of that just because the original game was largely 2D.
Yeah.
And trying to bring that into 3D, it would definitely have some serious challenges, but that is what I would really like because like Chrono Trigger is pretty much the game that made me really like RPGs growing up.
Mm-hmm.
I would just there hasn't really been, there was that like one random prequel Chrono Cross, and that was like kind of shit. Pardon my French. So yeah, I would really like to just see like a true Chrono Trigger remake. It'd be amazing.
So now, so Chrono Trigger was the Super Nintendo or the Nintendo?
Super Nintendo.
So why, if you like, why would you prefer a next gen remake of that rather than just like getting Chrono Trigger on the Wii Classic library and being able to play
because it's, because I had the old one. I've played it several times. Like I would just really curious to see what it would look like as like a full, HD, whatever.
Yeah.
Remake, and I don't know. It's just one of my favorite games, so I wanted to see it get some love.
Yeah, no, I understand that, and the feeling of like I loved this as a kid. Everyone else should too, but I know they're not going to like the original because they're
right.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Would you keep it the same, like exactly the same, and just change the art?
Mostly, there would be some amount of it that you would have to change just to bring it to 3D, like just the layout of the world and that kind of stuff. But I would definitely not touch the tech system because that was like one of the big unique things at Chrono Trigger. But did you guys play it?
No,
I played a little bit of it.
So like their big thing is each character has their own special attacks, but then if you wait until both their attack meters are full, you can have them combine their attacks together to make like a more powerful attack.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
For example, the one character might have like an ice spell, and then the other character might just have like a sword / attack, whatever. And so you can have the ice spell casted on an enemy and like freeze it in a block of ice, and then the guy slashes the ice in half, and like they just combine their attacks in really like fun, interesting ways.
That's
so
cool.
Like that sort of mechanic, there's no way you can change that. You need to leave that alone because that was like one of the biggest things about it.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was really sort of game breaking to me was it was one of the first, if not the first RPG that didn't have random battles.
Oh, okay.
Everything was sort of scripted, so you could always see the enemies on the screen, and you could, in some cases, avoid some fights if you like walked around them a certain way. And there were definitely scripted encounters that you couldn't skip, but it all took place on the same screen. Like there was no like loading screen while you go into the battle mode or whatever. It was just all on one screen.
On the
It was
SNES?
nothing random. Yeah, on the SNES. Yeah.
Wow. I feel like the lack of random battles, that's kind of that's it seems like random battles are a relic of the past, and that actually seems like something that would carry forward really well to modern RPGs.
So like those two things do not touch, but anything graphical I think would be totally fair game.
Cool. Adam?
Well, this is going to sound a little weird, but one of the games that I've always really wished they would remake is Sim Ant, which was I think it was only on the PC really, but
yeah,
it was a really fun game. I think it would work great in 3D because of the whole colony building aspect of it. I don't know if you ever played it, but you could dig out like terrain and make basically like your own little ant farm. And I think that mechanic like in 3D would be really interesting because you could dig out in all directions. But I would want them to update the gameplay as well. Like I feel like there's a lot of room for improvement there. But it was just one of those games that was like really fun to play as a kid. It was a simple concept, but it was also like funny, and I think it would appeal to like a lot of people. Like just living the life of an ant. Everything was from an ant's perspective. You can see like you're in the kitchen and like the light switches and stuff are massive, and you're just crawling along.
That sounds like a good candidate for like an indie early release Steam game.
Yeah, I saw there was this virtual reality simulator. I don't think they're making it into a full-fledged game. I think it was just like a demo type of a thing, but everything, you were basically an ant and you're playing like from the ant's perspective, and it looks beautiful. And I was just, when I saw that, I was like, man, I really wish they would make that into a full-on like ant sim game. It would be amazing, especially in VR, which is, I think some stuff would actually work better as a remake for like VR type games than maybe even just like regular 3D stuff.
Yeah. I think too, like with the, I guess the popularity of things like Goat Simulator, and then other other things like Prison Architect.
Yeah.
And what's that one game where you play you play a mother badger trying to get her babies across the field? Yeah. I think with the popularity of those now, I think like a kind of fun, lighthearted ant simulator, I think could do pretty well.
Yeah, especially since it's pretty kid friendly. I mean, it's not crazy violent or anything. I think a lot of those sim games I'd really like to see modern remakes. Like they used to have like a hospital sim game where you manage the hospital, and like a lot of that stuff is gone. And I mean, now Maxis is shut down, so I feel like there's not a lot of people really producing that kind of game anymore.
No, I mean, there's a new Sim City every couple of years, and there's the Sims, but yeah, you're right. Like Sim Hospital and Sim Tower. I mean, those are,
even the Sims is gone now because with Maxis being shut down, they're not going to produce any more Sims games.
Oh, I didn't hear about that.
Yeah,
Yep.
I figured EA would have just taken it.
Well, EA had already owned Maxis. They had bought them out, and they were but they were still letting them produce stuff, and then they shut down. So the Sim series is probably going to go away, but I would imagine they'd bring it back at some point. I mean, they had to have been making pretty decent money on that. That appealed to a huge audience.
Yeah. It seems like it's too much of a cash cow to just let it go. It had such broad appeal.
They might be trying to. I think they probably will want to try and figure out a way to market like the expansion packs, like with everything changing now to where you're not buying discs anymore. How do you market that as well?
Right.
It's all digital anymore.
Yeah. Yep. Speaking of VR, I had another game on my list that I know they've made new versions of it, but I haven't heard of any in VR. Do you guys remember Wipeout?
I do vaguely, yeah.
That was it like they weren't like jet boats. They were like spaceships, but they couldn't go fly up in the air, or they were like jet-powered hovercrafts, I guess. And it was just like high-speed races around these crazy tracks with like turns and upside-down sections. And
Yeah,
I think
I played a game like that recently.
And you want that in VR?
yes, I think that would be great in VR.
Oh man,
You might need like
motion
a puke bucket
sickness.
next to you.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yep.
that's what I was
But-
thinking. It might make you
So
sick.
much motion sickness.
Yeah, but I think it's good for the current state of VR because you don't need to like move around of your own accord, so you don't need like the teleport function.
Yeah,
you can just sit there with the controls and turn your
that
head to look
aspect
around and steer or whatever.
Totally can work. I'm just imagining trying to like do flips and go upside
God.
down and stuff in VR. It sounds like it would be impossible to get right.
Yeah, I was thinking about that with like, maybe like an Ace Combat Simulator or something like that. Like, it sounds like it would be awesome, but man, I think you would get really sick. Like, even just playing that on a regular screen kind of gets me.
Yeah, it's true. I think it'd be fun to try, but yeah, you're probably right. Playing it for more than a few minutes would probably make you pretty sick.
It would probably be really. I could see it feasible for like a more where you're not necessarily going in like loopy loops and stuff, but if you brought back like an old pod racer game or something like that, and did it in VR, that'd be pretty sweet, I think.
Yeah, I'm kind of surprised we haven't. I mean, maybe I'm just not following it close enough, but it seems surprising that there aren't more racing games in VR. Even like a Forza game in VR seems like it would work pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, it all comes back to the motion sickness thing. It's
Maybe you're right.
Deal.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've heard they have a lot of problems with that, even with regular type of stuff.
Oh yeah, like you can literally have a VR game where you're just walking around in like a room or something, and it will give you motion sickness if you do it wrong.
That's true. So do you guys have other games?
So got like an Final Fantasy VII got me on an RPG frame of mind thinking. More so than Final Fantasy VII, I would have liked to see Final Fantasy 3/6, depending on which country you live in.
6 was the one with Kefka, right?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah.
I loved that game. That was also one of my favorite of all times. And it would have the same problems with Chrono Trigger in terms of coming from 2D to 3D. And I don't know that there's like a specific reason why it would work great in HD. But I just really like the story, and it's just the whole nostalgia thing. So
do you think instead of going full 3D, do you think it would work better just like going like into HD 2D graphics, like
maybe
real high quality sprites?
Maybe I could see that.
Yeah, that might be, and it might even have more. It might keep more of the nostalgia with it too, because it's the sprites look better, but it's still 2-dimensional.
You could even go 3D, but do like an isometric kind of a thing where it's
Yeah.
Or everything's 3D, but it's just like pre-rendered out,
Yeah, that game just has like a really good story that I feel like still holds up even all these years later. Did you guys play that one?
I did. Well, I played part of it. I've played like the first 10 hours of so many RPGs.
Seems to be a theme with you, Dan.
Yeah, that's true. Definitely.
I feel like I missed out on RPGs when I was young. Like
the RPGs of the 90s were just amazing. Nothing these days can really compare, in my opinion.
Yeah, I was going through my old list of things, and I was like, I had to whittle down my list. I thought more. I can't think of the end of that sentence, but on my list I had like Parasite Eve, Xenogears, Jade Cocoon, all these like old classic RPGs.
Yeah.
Adam, do you have other games?
One of the things that I'd really like to see, even though they have modern versions, is like the old Command and Conquer games were huge.
Oh yeah.
Especially like Tiberian Sun was the one that I probably got into the most.
I played that one quite a bit.
Yep.
Yeah, I think part of it is like EA just killed it with the final game and ruined the series. So I wanted it to like rise again.
Yeah, Command and Conquer was the first RTS series I ever played, and that's kind of like what got me into like Sins of a Solar Empire, and then like the Warcraft games, the original ones, not like World of Warcraft, but
Right. Yeah, I played I played the Command and Conquer series, but before I ever played StarCraft, which is the big one for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. So for me, I had played a bunch of Command and Conquer. I did play Tiberian Sun a bunch, and then I had also played like the Nintendo 64 version, which is the fact that they tried to pull that off is just amazing.
Yeah, I played the one on PlayStation, and that was bad.
And pretty
like
much the day I discovered StarCraft, I never touched Command and Conquer again. To be perfectly honest.
StarCraft never did it for me because it didn't have the volume of units. That was one of the main things. Like once I'd played Command and Conquer, I went to StarCraft and I was like, eh.
Did you not play Zerg at all? Because Zerg is all about just insane volumes of units.
Do you mean like the number of units you can have, or like the variety of units?
Well, mostly in like the number of units that you had. Like when I played Command and Conquer Tiberian Sun, like we play online, and I mean you would have literally hundreds of individual units that you'd be controlling. Even with like aircraft and stuff, you'd have your whole base just filled with ships that you would send flying over, and it would just be this massive swarm. Maybe I just didn't play StarCraft enough, but when I did play StarCraft, it felt like you had fewer units and that they were like considered to be more valuable.
It's kind of interesting because that is Warcraft, like the original Warcraft strategy games are fewer, stronger units that are more valuable. StarCraft, especially if you play Zerg, is just like it's more about macro. It's more about how many units can you pump out.
Yeah.
Than it is about each one being super valuable.
That could just be me. Like I didn't play it a whole lot. Mostly,
if you made nothing but Zerglings, which is like the basic Zerg unit, you could have 400 of them before hitting supply cap.
Nice. Okay, so the last game I had was an old PlayStation fighting game called BioFreaks. I think it was the first fighting game with full 3D movement. Like you had this 3D arena where you could, you could fly around like with a jetpack and get behind your opponent or flank them, but it was still just one-on-one, and it was still mostly a fighting game. The interesting thing about it, though, other than the 3D movement, was it was a fighting game that actually had a lot of like projectile attacks. Like every character had some kind of gun or laser or like throwing star, and on top of that, the character design was really cool because there was this backstory of like the country like breaks off into 50 separate nation states, and then they all start creating these like cyborg warriors to fight against each other in this arena, and like that's how they settled their differences. And then there's this other backstory about like
Thunderdome.
Corporations own each of the different states. It had a neat backstory, and I think updating it with better graphics and a little better movement, not necessarily better mechanics, but just like tighter controls, I think would be I think it would stand out from the pack, or from the dearth of fighting games nowadays. I think it'd be pretty cool.
I can see that. I didn't play that one, so it's hard for me to comment too much on it.
Yeah, I don't think a lot of people did. I don't think it's that well known.
I've got one for you.
Okay.
Classic, I think it was Nintendo 64. Buck Bumble. I don't know if you ever played that game.
I think so. It sounds familiar, yeah.
That game was really interesting and really fun, especially with the whole dynamics of. Maybe I'm getting into like some kind of. I just realized the trend of like bug games that I've been playing, but just the perspective was unique in it, and I think it would work really well in like a modern HD format, and I think it would appeal to a lot of people.
What was So wait, like, it was about a bee, I'm guessing from the name?
Yeah, so you play as a bee and you could fly around, but it was almost like arcadey style, sort of like it was very cartoony. You could play multiplayer. The multiplayer was really good. But you're playing as a bee and you're flying around all the time. And like most of the enemies were like wasps and other bugs and stuff that you had to fight to get through the different map levels.
Mm-hmm.
the multiplayer was really good because you could have multiple players, like split screen, just flying around, and they also had like a mode that was similar to what's that game with the with the cars? It's like a soccer kind of a thing. So you would play
Rocket League.
Rocket League.
Yeah, so it was kind of like a Rocket League-esque kind of thing, but you're playing as the bee, and you have like laser guns that you can upgrade, and it was just an interesting perspective. It was, you could fly around. That'd be maybe another interesting one for VR even. And then everything was, even though it was stylized cartoony, it was like, giant mushrooms and blades of grass and all that kind of stuff. And I just remember that being a really fun game, and then it just went away.
It sounds cool. It seems like I think like the with modern graphics, I think more games with like where you play as a little tiny thing, and things that are normal are huge, I think could be really cool being updated to modern graphics, because there seem to be a lot of those on the PlayStation. Like there's a lot of bug games, like Toy Soldiers. I think wasn't that a series of games where you were a little tiny toy soldier and like
that was a good one where you played as like the little green army man.
That's it, not toy soldiers.
Yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, and you'd be like in someone's backyard, and there'd be like giant, swing sets and soccer balls and blades of grass and stuff, because you're this little like 2-inch plastic army man.
Yeah, I think that's fun because it takes modern graphics just a little step further, because you're not only getting the modern graphics, but you're also getting like that perspective that you don't get in a lot of games.
Yeah.
Of, something just unique.
And with modern graphics too, they could do a really neat job of like, if you have like a giant soccer ball, of like rendering the little pores, on the leather of the ball, or like, the hairs on a blade of grass.
Yeah, exactly. You could get that detail that you would never get in the low poly kind of stuff. You could, just because you can't get that texture resolution, so you could really bring out a lot of that.
Cool. Well, that's all I got. Do you guys have any more games?
So I just thought I should maybe talk a little bit. Maybe this is a shameless plug, but my company is totally working on the Crash Bandicoot remakes right now.
Oh yeah, let's talk about that.
So this is like super relevant.
Pretty good, actually. I remember we played that a lot at my house.
I love Crash Bandicoot.
I just mostly wanted to mention that like the response that we've seen from people is just like insane. Like people really are excited for this.
Yeah.
So it's like a really cool project for us to be working on. I'm pretty excited to see how people are gonna react to it when it releases.
Cool. I don't want to get you in trouble. Can you talk about any, like, if you've made any gameplay changes or if it's just graphical updates?
I don't know what has been announced and what hasn't.
Okay.
So I probably should not say anything just to be safe.
Yep.
But I will say that we're going through some serious efforts to try like really hard to keep as much as for the originals as like humanly possible.
Awesome.
I think there was a podcast or something where we talked about how like we basically got the original level geometry from Naughty Dog and like literally used that as the starting point. So like the layouts of the levels and stuff should be exact to what they were and that kind of thing.
That's cool. Yeah, that is one of the games that I'm like, I kind of want a PS4 now, because man, this is going to be cool. It's going to be like my childhood again,
Yeah, there's some good games for the PS4 that just make me want to buy one, even though I've not gone with a console since like the 360.
Yep. Yeah, same. Yep. Cool. Well, that's a good note to end on.
Yeah, it has been announced, by the way. That's June 30th.
June 30th. Cool. June 30th. Crash Bandicoot.
Nice.
Throw that out there. Shameless plug.
Nice. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the show, guys. As always, I appreciate it. As always, our listeners, if you like the show, please subscribe. You'll be notified when we upload something else.